Hello, I am Lukas Augustin. This is the Napokek podcast, and today I have Tomáš Funk with me. Hi, Tomáš. Hello, hello. You have probably heard many times just this week, but maybe also at other times, about the future of work. Whether robots will replace us, whether artificial intelligence will replace us. And in the world, hundreds to thousands of experts have emerged who will surely give you answers, but few do it daily, few do it in practice. And that's why I have invited Tomáš today, who is an expert in logistics. You are a fan of work automation, but also into modern technologies. Certainly. Technology that's on a daily basis today, there's always something to learn. I like discovering and learning new things, and there's always something to keep an eye on. It's just incredible, and one gradually gets into such a form, and that today it's just not enough to observe, and always feels like something is slipping away, always wants to educate oneself and can't keep up with the pace, so it's definitely interesting. What's also interesting is that when I look at your website for Funk Engineering, I see robots everywhere. I see warehouses that are completely automated, but I also see a combination of warehouses and humans working together. But at the same time, I want to start it a bit differently than with some bombastic headline. I would be interested in knowing what stage the world is in today. Whether we are in that phase of the early adopters, where we have perhaps 1% of companies that really robotize a lot, like Toyota, and maybe it's production of the Camry hybrid model, which was built for robots. Or if it is perhaps further along than I think. Well, it is. We must talk about the industry or that sector. Some things can be automated easily. A great example, Toyota car production.
Giro shift.
Very simply. I think because I always say that I do a lot for fulfillment, warehouses and distribution. It's kind of my hobby, and also because it's much more complicated to automate something like that. If you take car manufacturing, for example, there you have a production plan. So you know in advance how many units you will produce. Of course, you have to deal with the delivery of some materials, and everything has to fit into some timeline, and everything goes on time. So you have a relatively lot of time to prepare the system, and it doesn't change much over time, because when a car is made today, if I speed it up a lot, then it's done the same way for about 2 years. Or if you want to create a new model, you have about 3 years of preparation. So automation is built very easily there because you know in advance what you will be doing, how much you need to do. You perfectly plan capacities, performance, the flow of the robots. You will need to know how many robots you need, how many people, and that lasts for some time. So it's very predictive. And in my opinion, it's much easier to automate the production of something than, for example, those fulfillment warehouses where the environment changes from day to day, from hour to hour, because those distributions work like that. They are built on some online basis where there is some basic prediction, but the company can never exactly predict what the customer will order the next day. Or a new customer that just exactly, it fluctuates, and that's a big challenge to automate this because you have different types of products. There are many restrictions in terms of weight and dimensions, for example. So one has to be very careful here as an automator, because in this industry, automation can sometimes actually harm and slow down the business. That's why there are many companies, for example, in America, where I also spend some time, there is still a bit of a preference for the manual style of work. Because after all, when you have a lot of people today, these people are very flexible as they can handle more types of products. Whereas automation usually targets a certain type assortment, like a product. That means when there is some company or some manufacturer which has some product and knows in advance that this product will be sold for 1-2 years and won't be able to change that portfolio. For example, I don't know, thermoses, that's what we were dealing with now. So they probably won't be somehow reward over time. So you are able to somehow adapt that automation to it. So usually you automate the first part of that portfolio. But to answer you, today I think that it's very ahead, very advanced. when it comes to robotization. And much of it isn't even available outside in terms of information, because a lot of it, with the arrival of AI and especially machine learning, is at such a level today and is improving on a daily basis. Today I was taking a train here and I opened X again and saw a lot of new. I follow robotic channels there, and how it advanced, like the learning of robots. That today it's not even necessary to physically or data-wise show them anything, that it's enough to run some simulation and they calibrate themselves and learn to manipulate some type of product. Are you talking about Atlas now? No, not Atlas. And today, when you talk about those humanoids, these are basically the fields that try to mimic humans. That's actually what we wanted to get to, because one thing that struck me, which raises a big question for me, if I rephrase it a bit, is that the humanoid, simply we are not a completely efficient form to do work well, because legs, for example, they are not entirely optimal for movement. And I'm really interested in why so many companies like Atlas or Musk's, simply the robotics division, why we are so inclined to make it look like a human, when the real use likely won't be. A person juggles in the household to improve our mood, but rather more in those manufacturing plants, assembling some products or servicing a whole range of products, as it is in warehouses, etc. Yes, but that's a good question. It's mainly because the human work can be replaced as well as possible. Yes, because the closer we get to the person who can handle so many activities with hands, feet, head, then there will be much more room for deploying these robots which can replace the human one-to-one. Today it is about the fact that they already exist, like Clone Robotics, which is a very fascinating company. From California, they make one-to-one like a human. They are capable of making veins, everything, the entire manipulation. And they are really close to it, so then they just apply the AI, the machine learning, and they can make it work. The only thing that's still really missing today is the data. Now it will be about collecting them. I think that next year, maybe 3 years, it will mainly be about machine learning and how to actually get that information into those robots. Because today, for example, autonomous cars, that's just a massive collection of data information. Today, cameras are driving. It has everything. It collects the data. It evaluates it quite effectively. What we don't have fully mapped yet are those activities. So then, for example, in the field I am dealing with, like the fully autonomous warehouses, it currently works such that there's a person who has some sensors on their fingers. And it works like a human, but the data is collected and then transferred to the robot. However, it already has a machine learning algorithm based on that data and can kind of learn and improve by itself. Now, it was about putting sensors a lot on hands, feet, back, and actually the system, usually it is connected with some system that knows what it's doing. Like with ballistics, when they have that kind of sports bra, data is collected too. So I know that when I have sensors on my hand, now I know I took a cup because it is somehow connected with the system. I place it somewhere, it learns, various movements are recorded, and then it's done. Simply implement it into the hardware. Now, with the arrival of vision and those systems, it will be much easier because...
Maybe explain what vision means.
In short, simply, you no longer need to have any sensors on you. You have glasses with a camera that, for example, capture your hands and can transfer that image into some data structure. So, for example, if you look or play mobile games during a shift, it goes straight to HR to fire you. Yes. No. On one hand, when we are discussing people versus robots, we are partly to blame ourselves because there are not enough people. People don't want to do this job. But this, sorry to interrupt you, that's exactly it. There are not enough people. They don't want to do it. But still, many economies actually depend on this work. We see it in America now, where there's speculation about the deportation of illegal migrants, but it will have a huge impact on the economy because they do the jobs not everyone wants to do, but they are willing to do. Sure, but that opens up a lot.
even more room for automation. The system is ready for it today. So it's about data collection and hardware. And today it's really improving on a weekly basis. The biggest disadvantage overall is still robotization, not just those humanoids who aren't yet physically perfect. And today, robotic arms are used a lot, but simply the biggest disadvantage is that it's slow today. Last year, for example, it was in a much simpler state, so you needed 3 to 4 robotic arms for one person's. Today, for one person, you already need 2 robots. This means that one person
The end.
works with their hands. You need 2 robots because they are slower to achieve the same performance. So even here, this is getting much faster. But today, the person is still irreplaceable in that. It depends on what branches we're talking about, whether someone has to count some fine textiles, assemble something, or handle simply small things, earrings. It's still such that the person does it much faster because the robot, it does it like one by one like this, while the hand simply grabs, counts some 10 pieces and puts them somewhere, and it's much faster. The robot can't do it yet today, but it will be able to.
Yeah, which means I also got involved in it because the Czech Republic is like I think we have the most logistics companies per capita in the world. It's a fact, as they say, that we are the assembly line, so we are like the logistics vein of Europe. There's a lot here, and of course, many people, especially those employed in that new venture, are probably worried. But I think this news gives them some hope. But I might completely turn it to another extreme because I obviously listen to podcasts where you were featured, and there's one topic we've never discussed, if I'm not mistaken, and that's it. Do you know the YouTube channel Cold Fusion? That's a channel just like you. They are curious people, technology enthusiasts, but they investigate scams, frauds in this industry. And many frauds come exactly from this AI industry and these modern technologies. Most often it's like, I can't remember the lady's name, who wanted to do diagnostics from a drop of blood. And today there's really a lot, and there are so many scams that there's always some charismatic founder who comes in, says they have something revolutionary, uses all the right buzzwords, and then it turns out to be nothing. I want to look at it from a different perspective. Let's say I'm the warehouse manager, head of a role perhaps. I'm the head of a logistics network for rolls or baskets. And now actually, how do I know which of the technologies I should buy? And if it's even worth it now, or if it's terribly expensive, because you mentioned how it's always about the technologies and people, but I wonder if the production of those technologies can keep up, if you can even order it, if it's not a 3-year waiting period, and so on. Sorry, I asked a lot of questions at once. It's a lot.
I'll probably start
that's a
right
lot,
from the beginning. I don't know if I will remember everything, but I'll go back here to the
So
Czech
you're
Republic.
waiting, just in case.
Technologically, we've advanced a lot logistically as an industry, or it employs a lot of people. That's true. It is true that the Czech Republic does not yet have such pressure for automation because we still have cheap labor here. If we compare, for example, take Germany, so there you simply have to push for automation because the costs for those people, unreliable people, consider it. Take Sweden, there it is 30 euros per hour, just a basic warehouse worker, for example.
Plus systematically.
So there are different sectors, different countries where it pays off to invest and automate because the return is quick there. And now it depends on the type of industry. Every business is completely different. Every industry is different. So automation is possible, but sometimes it's more complicated and sometimes it doesn't make sense at all. I also work for a company that is it is much more efficient to do it manually.
It's the don't
where
click,
I would recommend automation.
Okay.
They might not have the volume. The products are so complicated and the workforce is so available and so cheap that the return just isn't there right now.
These are the indicators on which they decide.
But it is always business. So with every new investment, every new technology, you really have to analyze that investment in detail and actually proceed.
If that technology even exists, yeah,
you can always do something. It's always a combination. There isn't one technology where you can just say, I'll open some fulfillment warehouse and have one technology that will handle everything. It's always really the integration of several different hardware and software into one that works like some ecosystem. So it's also unique that it's quite a demanding project, but I wanted to say that some companies are forced to automate because, for one, manual labor is extremely expensive and sometimes unavailable. And if a company wants to grow, it simply has no other choice. I know companies that don't really focus on whether the investment will pay off or not because they want to grow. And it's not possible with people. So there are companies looking for a return on that technology within 3 to 5 years.
So if they don't find it?
Personally, I work in such a way that if it doesn't return within 3 to 5 years, then I don't like it. And then there are companies that simply have to invest. Maybe the investment will never pay off, but they need some growth. It's just not possible with people anymore. Like, they've hit some sort of ceiling. So these are two different perspectives.
When you compare work generally in Europe and maybe overseas where you have also worked, what are the main differences?
Bureaucracy, that's probably for another
aside
podcast.
from bureaucracy?
But even that, I think, is solvable. The typical West is very business oriented. They like a lot is built on growth. We in Europe are more like we try hard to be stable. We do a lot of planning ahead, analyze. We are very much engineering minded in Europe. Even here in the Czech Republic, in Germany, we plan a lot, think a lot, and the more you plan and analyze ahead, the more you miss the train. That's exactly the German model. And that is the same here, like convincing a company today to enter this technology sector and invest, for example. And not only that, it's also smaller companies, even bigger ones, but they just think for so long. Analyze, want to compare everything possible in the world, and then maybe choose nothing. And simply 5 years are gone, and they've just missed the time. America is very proactive in this, and it's like Manekatov, simply a huge investment. Per capita, there are the most investments in the world there because those technology companies pour a lot of money into it and have a greater willingness, or they take bigger risks if it doesn't work out, but they simply go for it. So in America, it's faster, and there are 3 reasons for this. The first is that there is some capital that can be obtained more easily and quickly.
For now, he counts within that as he does
And
business.
if a company wants to innovate and has already accomplished something, it is not a problem to obtain external funding. The second thing is that still in America there are enough people and many. This might change a bit with the
Well, thanks, team. Where are you?
arrival of the president, who can cover some part of the business with cheap labor. The third thing, which I might put in first place, is the regulations. There we honestly opened quite a lot of warehouses in America, and there it went with a really luxurious snap of the fingers. It was beautiful to watch how the business easily scaled and expanded into different states. Here one encounters so many obstacles in terms of some construction of technologies or warehouses due to certain integrations. It's so regulated that it slows everything down. In America, it really favors businessmen and it just works quickly. But there, it's about when a person build, everyone goes to support him because everyone simply has some interest in it.
If it actually
and
happens.
It grows. Here, a person just wants to do something and is constantly dealing with various obstacles, and they go against you to make it as complicated as possible. The Western market simply allows you to easily implement these projects.
That's actually an extremely pessimistic outlook, you know. I had Tomáš Mikolov here, and he said exactly what you did. That regulation is easy, but deregulation is really difficult. and Europe regulates too much. And now the economic future for European business does not look good at all, because now we see the cases around Volkswagen, we see cases around the Chinese entry into the European market regarding cars and so on. And if there are tariffs on Europe, that will be quite
But one
a
more thing
disco
actually
at
occurred to
first.
me. Now that I think about it, as I said, that we're kind of engineers a lot, planning and thinking a lot. Well, Europe is good in that, because when we do something or come up with something, it is flawless. In quotes, we spend so much time on it, planning and calculating, that when it's produced, the product is of high quality. In the West, things are tested. There it just goes. If you don't know it, then we try it differently. It's much faster there, because they don't have that wall in front of them. If you don't know something, it's over. And they don't aim to make something totally 100% perfect. They really use trial and error, just trying and testing things. If something is unclear, they transform into something else. They learn a lot from mistakes. When we in Europe have to first iron out all the use cases, all the errors, and then release something to the world, that's how I see it. And you can see that when you mentioned automakers,
Thank you. So
Tesla, for example, was not a perfect product at all. They wanted
Hello?
it from the
Mhm.
world, and it's not. But they just release it to the world. They go, get some feedback, and again, have that flexibility, and they just fix it somehow or do some update, and it just gets there over time. Whereas here, with how regulated we are and how we want everything perfect, we just fall behind, and then it's a problem.
Exactly. We just recalled Jakub Wagner, the fisherman, had an excellent interview on Brewcast. He said that when he was in Australia, he had someone like a mentor there. And it seems to me that the mentor perfectly understood Europeans, because he said that Europeans tend to hold themselves back in everything, and especially countries of the former Soviet bloc, actually the Eastern Bloc, that we have this envious mentality and a lot of resistance to change. And I think that now, when I was talking about those innovations, those investments, that it is clear that there is a huge difference between, for example, Scandinavia and exactly our country, that they come to us like, hey, there are some electric cars here, and we will endlessly speculate how it is a Brussels conspiracy, but it is actually a terrible nonsense. But we kind of lack the ability to say, look, and isn't it perhaps an interesting product for maybe 10 to 20% of the market, which might actually help with something? I'm not being an advocate or a devil's advocate here, but I rather think that the difference in mentality is not only business related, but also an
yes,
overall
definitely,
approach to things.
like agreement. You said it well. Concisely, resistance to changes, but that's because we live well here. We don't have to work.
Well,
and we can
actually,
live.
it is safer here.
Here, people simply receive some support benefits, and simply when they don't have to do anything, they somehow manage to adapt and feel good. Every change first causes hatred, then some concerns.
And we
Try
could
to
heat
adapt
it.
and look a little not on what is now, but ahead. That's just it. That's bigger. That's, by the way, also how I work with those companies. So it's really like, that's a European mindset, well captured, that they just look at what's now. But it's necessary to really look ahead. Even those people won't be here in 5 years.
So let's move forward with another question. You are someone who, of course, likes technology, and ideally, I should ask you about how you have an empty warehouse, how you fill it with a robot, and have a limited budget, but I'll do it a bit differently, okay? I'll make a more pragmatic detour. I would be interested if someone is listening to us now who wants to start their first business. It could be a warehouse, or it could just be organizing a room. What advice would you give? Regarding efficiency and creating a good work environment that has some efficiency, what advice would you give to people starting out?
That's quite a challenging question. First, I would ask, but what do you actually want to do? That's probably the fundamental question. What is really the vision? What do I want to store there? Should it be explosives? Should it be tractor tires? Should it be earrings? Or should it be a mix? Or doing ceramics? My wife can do ceramics, so I would like to sell her products. And regarding automation, there you immediately encounter the category fragile. So be careful there too, because there's ceramics. It's probably very fragile.
Thank you. Good day.
I don't know how it goes today. So it's been some time. So it's probably good to pack it, and now adapt. If someone wants to have it as autonomous as possible, then adapt the production process for that. Yeah, because we're talking about, you said some ceramics,
I had a big morning.
something for this first, some further distribution. Yeah, so the question is, who manufactures it? It can be somehow wrapped during production with some bubble wrap or paper and sent as finished to the warehouse, so you don't have to worry about it when you sell it. I also still need to rent a warehouse, actually. Right, yeah. So that's something I do, because there are companies that want to automate and digitalize, but the products simply do not meet the parameters for automation. For example, I am currently dealing with a humanless warehouse for a company that deals with textiles. So there deals with textiles.
Completely
textiles,
without people.
Distribution. Well, for now, there are still some people there. And we have several phases that over time it will transition into the project or process without people. And there are actually a lot of things that the company no longer realizes. They don't have to handle it in-house, but they can perhaps change the production, the manufacturing process, but just do it in a way that it's ready for robotic picking. That means it will be packed in some sort of film, for example, picking like either I take it by hand, for example, or the robotic arm takes it, just materials from somewhere to somewhere. So it's important to look at where the product originates and whether they might already be able to manufacture it in a way that's a bit more suited to this, instead of doing everything in-house, like by hand, manually. So there are many such things. It's very complex.
However, I just understand it well, which means that, for example, someone who is skilled in ceramics makes some nice product. Today, it's like those producers of luxury vases that you create a beautiful design, describe the manufacturing process, but then outsource it somewhere where they can produce it at a certain quality that I oversee, but then it will be produced there.
Sure. So I take it on a large scale, but that is exactly the breaking point where it pays off to automate from a certain volume. When you sell or make 3 vases a day, it's not really worth it. So automation makes more and more sense. The volume is large. There might be multiple shifts because the return on investment differs if you have one shift from Monday to Friday with some technology compared to having 3 or 4 shifts and 24/7. So the return is much quicker then. So we always have to talk about some volume. It doesn't always make sense, but then it shifts to a phase of some standardization, some volume. There is some repetitive activity in the warehouse, like taking that phase, putting them into some kind of boxes, for example. All of this will be automated. I might still return to the vision, as I mentioned. The next step will be that the people in the warehouses will have glasses with some kind of camera, and that camera will capture what they are doing. If you can imagine it in the warehouse with the vases, it would probably look like this manually. An order comes in, you might print it out, you go to some position where the product is, you take it, unpack it, put it into some crate, maybe put it on some conveyor or carry it to some packing station. There a shipping label is applied and it just goes off to the customer. So I give you the glasses. The glasses perfectly map out even the space, so they can scan everything around. They will learn to record the data for as long as it takes until there is a perfect simulation of you as an employee. And then they will add some clever hardware that simply imitates it. And it will be learning. You are completely a step ahead, because when I talk to Daria Vizdelova, who is quite involved here, by the way, do you know her? I know her.
You should definitely get rid of it. I can easily connect you. You should do that, because on the contrary, they might be working on something like being in a factory and, let's say, repairing a television, some expensive plasma for 200 liters. And there they do it by putting on those glasses, and it shows you exactly the steps you need to take. So it's like the task is simulated in this way, and you go and realize, oh, I've validated this, and this is how it gets standardized. But you are in the loop ahead of this that what is already happening, the system learns it and then it actually replaces you.
Sure. So like the cars today are learning from those cameras. It will be the same with the cameras on people. The software will learn based on those vision things, for instance, in the warehouse or in production. Of course, it can then be easily replicated and scaled.
When will this be? And don't give me a long time, but Tomáš time.
5 years.
Really? And where will the companies get the money for those glasses, smart one?
Maybe they won't need those glasses anymore. They'll just take some data set of those tasks, today already. Like they buy it, the companies, they already made data that were, for example, gathered in China but today, for example, I'll give you an example, not on a humanoid robot, but on robotic arms, for instance. Last week, I was in England to see an interesting technology, and I can probably say it here. Yeah, you can. It's Ocado, a company. It's from the UK. And they actually do a combination of something like goods to present, which means technology that delivers the goods from a warehouse to the hands of a person or a robot, which then prepares it according to the orders into some packing halls, something like Locus. Well, much more sophisticated. It's like a storage cube warehouse where robots are moving on top. And it's good for the utilization of space. But I probably don't want to talk about that now. It's about the machine learning because they do groceries, meaning food, which is very complicated to store. There are simply, for example, 200,000 different types. Items from baked goods to frozen chickens to super small chewing gums. There are vegetables. They actually started by doing, Ocado does, it's something like Rolik, if I can say so, in England. It means they do food distribution directly to the customer's door and they have several warehouses and they developed their own technology. They invested a lot of money into it and are trying to automate as much as possible. So I went there to see how they are doing. And they have robotic arms that take products from those bins where there are multiple pieces and distribute them into several orders at once. And they started by being able to handle about 5% of the total volume of those products. Today they are at something between 5 and 40. How many years later? Only 1 year later, and now this year they want to achieve 80%. But I want to say that almost no one programs it anymore. The robot learns on its own because it has a camera. The detection is there at the inbound where products are received, and they already have a lot of data about it. And I had to handle it for one company, precisely the textile. And we set them a complex task. Here are some crates, here's a tossed t-shirt, here are caps. And we wanted to see if the robot could sort of handle it. And is there just a barcode on it? No, not at all. It sort of learns it, and you can clearly see there how the robot learns by itself, for example. But there were examples, like specific ones. In the crate, there were caps, baseball caps. And they are packed as efficiently as possible, of course. So they are stacked like this. And we told it that we had those products there, and we wanted to test if the robot could handle it. And there it was clear to see that the robot was, of course, pre-configured, but it had machine learning. This means that for the first time, the robotic arm, it had a kind of suction cup on it. So it analyzed the space in the bin and then tried to pick up the cap. First it fell, the second time it fell too. He tried to pick it up from the other side and then realized that was best because it was firm. So he grabbed it by the peak, threw it into the crate. He learned that move by himself. Then he went for another one, and when he placed it, he even understood that the robot, just as it was stacked inside, he also then placed it into the other container. He stacked it exactly as it was. So this is precisely an example of how the robot, it has some basic input data, an enormous database of various products, and it can learn by itself. And of course, a person still plays a big role today. They, for example, have a very big business in that, so they sell such fully autonomous solutions. And when, for instance, the company has a new product and the robot doesn't know it, or the system doesn't know it, doesn't have enough data, then they simply have a camera on it and some online support. And that's just engineers available worldwide 24/7. And they get some impulse that there's a new item, they don't know anything about it, and the robot can't handle it. They connect to it remotely and simply teach it with a mouse how it's done. They show it 3 times and he says, aha, so for this task, I must do it like this. And then it kind of learns on its own. It is designed in such a way that it shouldn't limit or stop production and distribution. There is a team of people who are able to remotely control the robot and even teach it to handle new products here. And it works like this. Today it learns, and every day new learning and new items are added. So it has vast information about the data. Of course, shadow fragile products are a big problem. Heavy products, like sodas, for example, 6 pieces in one wrap, so it's very heavy to move somewhere. But again, they have, for instance, in my eyes, it's still quite behind because the robot usually has something like a suction cup or something to pick things up and can't effectively transform from a suction cup to fingers. It might have some tools around it and says, okay, now this is a t-shirt. So it uses one hand. Now it's a can, so it uses a suction cup and it changes like this, which is very inflexible. And maybe for these questions, the humanoids would be super. So it's always about that must. Professionally, I would say, damn, like it is, like it's progressing a lot. I have a feeling that if the company has stock, they can be bought because it's, well, probably yes. And if I were to invest, like rather, not that, but I don't want to give specific advice, of course, but more into computational, like the performance of some company that manufactures these stanchions, because there is massive data collection and evaluation in real time. This, what you're saying, I think it's the same channel. I think even Cold Fusion talked about it. I'm not 100% sure, but it's a very interesting case with Samsung because Samsung, as you know, was a long-time supplier of chips, for example, for Apple and for many other companies, and they made an incredible amount from it. Yeah, but they are a family business. I think they're called the Lihove, and they really run it like a dynasty. And 1 year, they couldn't innovate quickly enough. So their biggest clients, and we're talking about $50 billion in profit for that year, just said, this isn't so good. We're switching to Snapdragon. Sure. And they simply moved to Trao or that huge Taiwanese company.
Yeah.
And now imagine that you're just that Joe up there in Samsung. 1 year, you simply don't deliver the top product to stay ahead of the market, and you're just in high. Incredible. It's moving forward. It's vast. Like it is, well, it's a bit intimidating. Well, a little, well, that's interesting. Like I am like already kind of hardcore, like on this, maybe like looking very far ahead, that sometimes I just miss the human essence, and these things, but it is just fascinating, and it's going in that direction. It just won't go back, that's just a clear thing. So, and the data, today, with the arrival of things like AI and such, the data is everywhere nowadays, and it's collected absolutely everywhere. Today you have cameras everywhere, voice, text, everything. So you have to work well with it, right? Yoshi, you set me up perfectly for a segue because this is extremely interesting. You are involved in logistics, warehouses, production, everything around it. When you look at MPS, you give data. So guess what is in the top 10 most desired professions and most in demand ones?
Thank you.
In addition to assistant cooks and tinsmiths and those professions that are always lacking, there are warehouse workers, but mainly drivers. That really, like, drivers are a big ticking time bomb By the way, even the police have a big problem, generally, like the state agencies. But when we talked a lot about those robots, people in the warehouse, as you said, are somehow still possible to find. But drivers, that's really a big issue. Do you have experience with this shortage too? And if it's being addressed? Because I know that autonomous cars have been tested, but then there were huge scandals with hydrogen cars that didn't exist and so on. So how is humanity dealing with this? It's quite a sensitive topic.
Thank you.
But I see it clearly. Drivers will not be needed.
Reku.
Of course, there will be a gradual transformation, but I feel that it's not as far along as, for example, the warehouse world. Well, sure, like in Europe, it will be more complicated. The regulations will slow us down a bit, but look at it. It's not necessarily on such a bad path when we talk about self-driving, for instance. For example, Ford has already introduced those blue zones. And almost all highways in the Czech Republic and even some side roads, you can drive without holding the steering wheel. And that is already legally set up here. Tesla, for example, does not yet have that in Europe. Well, it doesn't have it, but it probably will. Look, it will again be about that. Like the car is still, it's exactly the same use case as a robot, right? It will just have some no-go zones, right? Where the robot just must not go because maybe the environment is not quite suitable there. So there will be some kind of tracks. And I see car mobility simply, I compare it to maybe storage. For me, it's like a car is like a little box on a conveyor, if I put it that way. But precisely, I have to play here. I was a lawyer when he said that in 5 years, you will see that in those warehouses, it will really come to the point where technologies will gradually replace even people. But now you mentioned regulations in transport. And when I see cities like Guangzhou in China or like California, where drones are already commonly flying, Amazon is testing it. A lot of other companies in China, there it's already happening. Today, you told me before filming that some companies already have cars, although with a driver, but without doors. But I wonder if there won't be a major discrepancy, that in 5 years the warehouses will be highly automated, but the cars might take 2 or 3 times longer. They can, yes, probably because they are changing the infrastructure established, which has been here simply for hundreds or tens of years. Innovation in this environment is just extremely costly, complicated, and mainly time-consuming. So, but like when we talk, for example, about delivery, like transporting from one place to another, there will be several options, right? Today, what we already see, for example, are autonomous cars. Runs on to manage delivery? Probably yes. Not directly to the customer, but to another hub, for example. These are often called black stores. That means you might have a central warehouse, and for you to deliver as quickly as possible, because the biggest pressure today is on time, you need to build a network of branches in places where it makes sense. That is the biggest challenge, for example. But these might be smaller warehouses. Here, for example, I don't know, Rolik doesn't have just one warehouse in Prague, but they have several to deliver as quickly as possible. So there will be such networks. They could be like those boxes, something like the Alza boxes or parcel lockers, but they have to turn around. Today, it works as a pickup box for you, which should become like a micro warehouse. And it's, again, about the data. So I know that, for example, now we are in Prague, that in this location, for instance, 100 HDMI cables are simply sold every day. So those will already be in the box. They won't be waiting for someone to sort of order them. And someone will transport it there. It just takes some time. It's expensive, but it will already be waiting there. Because I know there is some prediction that, or some SD cards or whatever else, but simply a bigger box where it will already live, it will be filled. And when you order something, it will beep right away. Hey, you have it here? Yeah. Then the next step will be that last mile delivery, meaning from that micro warehouse to your home, like to your door, right? And we already see today, right? Just
like this.
Miami, California. It's like well, drones are not fully allowed yet, but you have those micro vehicles. That's like a little box. You know, it has 4 wheels and just moves, right? And it's exactly the same use case as with those robots. And sorry, no one controls it, right?
Overturn the government.
Yes, it is controlled. Like behind each of those robots, yes, but not all the time, right? Well, when that vision finally tells you, oh, there's some risk of some problem or some obstacle, or someone kicked it, you know, or something.
That's
it's like
too
air
much.
traffic. Exactly. So if a night comes and someone connects to it, like says, yeah, or just can communicate with the customer, well, someone, they say, hey, I'm already at the door. Greet the customer or drive off the shooter
Great.
dog. for example, or something like that. So it's still in the works. Some person, but there are fewer and fewer because it's about collecting that data. And we will reach a point where there won't be 100 people, but maybe one person who will just be on standby and will handle these things, you know? So, in my opinion, this has a solution, Then, of course, and this is an absolute extreme, it's possible. Like Elon also kind of tried or had such an idea with his tunnel, right? So I believe there will definitely be some shortcuts like this. As I say, conveyors not in a warehouse, but perhaps between some cities. What people order, if it's not a washing machine or a bed, then most, like 90%, are just small things, some little boxes where it's either taken by a drone, a little car, or you put it on some fast track, which brings it to some hub or directly to you. And it has a solution. And I think that regulations will be managed by those things. I don't know how it will be with safety. That's a big question. Data leaks, because today the biggest problem is that artificial intelligence is really very smart. Smarter than all of us here combined, and above all, it decides quickly, a close person, and those autonomous cars are definitely safer. I have two eyes. There will be comments, well, I have two eyes. That car has eyes at the back, the front, the sides, and I simply don't have that. The human brain is just really slow. The eyes are really far from the brain. But my dog, I think, even has eyes at the back. Well, that's possible. They actually have. But I don't know how they are with driving, for example. If I were to run, that's what would be left of me. So the system is smarter, and when it's smarter, it's safer, but also more risky. If today you can already irritate AI, well, sure. So try asking the AI, for example, what it thinks about Trump, or have it repeat a word of someone 1,000 times for you. Or Kelimek, if you tell him to say it 1,000 times, he sort of gets annoyed after a while because he gets bored. So those models, as they learn quickly, find some things just like it's stupid. Like, why should they do it? Right? It just
And
takes me 2
so
hours.
that's when it
Like,
sums
and
you
now
up.
it asks you, just asks you if you're not joking with it. Like, honestly, right? Really, yes. So when you have too much and too much of that data, well, you don't address safety. Then when it's, of course, put into those robots, right, or somewhere, then there it must be very regulated, right? Even when robots come into the household, I don't really think there will be a case where you have a robot at home that looks like a person. The Chinese case with American
Hello.
vacuum cleaners, for example, well, a vacuum cleaner, sure, yes, but a vacuum cleaner is, I'm more talking about having a real robot, like with a camera, and from all of them, I definitely think it won't be, even in a few decades, that the robot will move freely around the household. I always think you will have some kind of no-go zone. It's simply your living room where it can just be closed off. And if the robot gets in there, it just turns off, or something. So some kind of security will have to be there because it's dangerous, I don't know how this will be resolved. It's just kind of an unknown, really. When I look at it a bit from a communist perspective, it means that when people are pushed out, actually, some people pushed out of that sector, let's say, it sounds very, when I say low skilled, but simply there's not a high entry level of what you have to know. So it means that the craft will blossom again, basically, that people who may not want to or do not have the skills to become rocket engineers will have to learn again and do the irreplaceable specific work. You said it nicely. I know what you mean. But definitely we can see that today, like there are fewer and fewer people who can somehow to master a profession. I think they are getting more and more inaccessible, more expensive. That's really in demand today. Yeah, it's like that with comedians and things like that. But I think it's a phase now that you need these people. But over time, you will transition into, and you can already see it today in construction. Yeah, everything is being simplified. Today, crazy houses with various shapes and complicated roofs are no longer built. Today, it's a box, flat
And
roof. Everything will be made like that. like English low maintenance stuff, because those people won't until the production adapts to it. So scoriti will be simplified, but people won't even want a huge house, multiple rooms, just complicated stuff, because they know it involves some maintenance. Everything will move towards simplicity, standardization, and some plug and play solutions. I think you will then just deal with some repairs. Microwaves, for example, just a minute for a piece. But at the same time, human whims won't disappear, because people always want to distinguish themselves from others. And that's why I think that crafts will be up again, but of course they will fulfill those specific tasks. Sure, but I think you touched on it here. We discussed that today already. As you map that craft, it's mostly not like rocket science, right? Just fixing something. The problem is that people are just lazy. They don't want to do it. They have completely different interests. Maybe they don't have the tools for it, the means, the equipment to fix something. But then AI helps, right? Today I can ask it, hey, my washing machine just broke. I don't know what to do, right? You probably hire a craftsman. And first, it offers you some checklist, like, have you checked this, reset that? What about the cable? Is it okay? Is the power going to the house? You do this basic checklist, which nowadays would be considered obvious, but not many people know how to do it. Something goes wrong, the internet, they call someone, and meanwhile, there are some cracks. A tripped circuit breaker, for example, or an unplugged cable, that can happen. So the AI will give you that basic checklist for every single thing that you're able to somehow resolve in-house. Then for the more skilled ones and those who want it, it provides a more detailed manual. For example, you might need to change the filter or something. You do it like this and that. Put on the glasses. You mentioned it, right? And just do what I tell you. Put your hand here, put your hand here. Show me that filter. It's the right one. It's the wrong one. It will even order you a new one. So you'll be able to do a lot of things by yourself with the help of modern technology like this, which I really don't know if it's beautiful or if it's terrifying. But when we talked about the craft, I really asked myself the question, if humanity, I'm posing some kind of controversial thought in conclusion, because when we look at it statistically again, then as Elon Musk says, that those truly skilled, smart people aren't multiplying. And when we really look at it data-wise, I don't mean to offend anyone, but really smart people don't reproduce. At the same time, IQ is one of the most heritable traits, which means that when you are a smart person and have a smart person next to you, then it is 99% sure you will have a smart child. And yet, humanity, with the help of those technologies, let's say, will not become smarter at all. And I'm thinking, what does this mean for humanity? What is the outlook? Because even today, when I reach for my phone, I literally have all the answers to everything in the world. Plus, OpenAI, about a week ago, released these thinking tokens, and it already does research for you, like from relevant sources. And I'm kind of wondering what it means for our children. But maybe in conclusion, I wouldn't completely dismiss it, because I hope that's our positive answer. Well, I think that the humanity, like, it will be a great luxury, like a smart person, educated, who can have a conversation with someone about something and somehow make them form their own opinion, not just record something, read. So it will be not only much more complex, but it will also have some sort of greater value. So I think many people will return. It's possible that there will be camps of people here or some zones, or they will go completely overboard. Like visually, some islands where people will live in full automation and won't want to deal with anything. And then there may be some islands where they will meet and maybe even multiply. That would be kind of, well, something like that could probably be resolved somehow. Gelon sees it a step further, so he will send them straight up there. He'll be sending that bun to him because of how he's been behaving lately. It's possible, so yeah. But yes, the society is dividing, that's for sure. Like, you probably won't have to be too smart anymore. You have to, in order to live normally. Like, it's a problem. Smart people don't reproduce. As he said, today, I think, how many children do you need to have 22 and a half. So we're all behind, right? So we are again becoming extinct. So we have to automate. But exactly like when there is some prediction about job satisfaction for highly qualified positions, the birth rate really drags it down. This is increasing, but there aren't as many people who are capable of doing the highly qualified work. That's what I thought. And also, when you got rid of it, like you asked about what children or for future generations, there's actually a big concern. They will prioritize the digital environment over the real one because today it is much more comfortable. For example, chatting with AI that agrees with you, that simply gently caresses and doesn't complain, doesn't humiliate you, and you can connect with it. And I'm afraid that in some cases, some individuals might completely shift into to the virtual, ready, let run.
Nice play.
Exactly. So they don't even have to travel anymore. They just put on those glasses and choose where they are. And that is like a big warning. Or will there be another group of hippies? There definitely will. That maybe the next generation will be technological skeptics and will want it not to progress further, like it was with the development of atomic bombs. How was it? It was called robot. So I guess yes, there will be many opponents of this, I think, but we are doing it to ourselves. I still think that simply we don't want to work, it's more complicated with those people. A human is, let's be honest, a very unique, extremely unreliable creature. If you want to build something, if you weigh it out, relying on a human or relying on some robot or technology, then the robot will probably be more reliable. It's like said, but that's probably the direction it's going, and we have to be concerned about it already now. On the other hand, to end on a positive note, despite everything happening in the world, we are living in the best times. I agree. Our lives are much easier than those of our ancestors, but we must not mess it up. That's right. It's very interesting. Anyway, Tom, thanks for the interview. Sure, thanks. Take care. Take care. Bye.